Hello and good evening. Welcome back to Oscar's Corner Cafe. Thank you for clicking play and let's get this shit going. Today's date is January 23rd. Thank you for somebody who caught that and lit the comment. 2026. Man. Damn. So I was thinking about doing this particular episode, I think, at some point last week, and I just didn't feel like it. And then this week, after the San Francisco 49ers played, I think I'm going to dive right into that. And for some of you that do know and are first-time listeners, I definitely want to engage with you and let you know what the channel's about, right? So basically, the channel is a parent's perspective on many different views, some of which you might relate with, some of which you might not. We are completely 100% unscripted. There is no chat GPT shenanigans in the background scripting anything for me. This is what it is. So be mindful of that, all right? So if you have kids in the car while you're listening to this in particular, there will be some cussing, so just be mindful of that, all right? I'm going to try to keep it clean as possible. However, there is no guarantees because when I speak about the San Francisco 49ers, I just do not know. So let's get started. So number one, the San Francisco 49ers unfortunately lost to the damn freaking stinking Seahawks. So, got their asses whooped actually. And then the Rams beat the Chicago Bears. And then so we're looking at the NFC Championship looking like the two teams that I completely dislike. Dallas at this point, they're not even a topic, and the Raiders, forget it because their organization is just shit. So who do I not like? Well, I don't like the Rams because I think that I am jealous, I believe, in their success and how they've built their team. So, and then the Seahawks, same thing. They've done what they've done and they've been successful. They got a brand new coach. They kicked Pete Carroll out and they picked up Sam Darnold. And I thought that shit, maybe they were going to be a complete shit show and a disaster. And instead, they turned out to be one of the most dominant defenses in a minute. So those of you who do know or have followed the Seahawks throughout their history, and even as far back as maybe over a decade ago, you guys can all understand that the San Francisco Seahawks, get the fuck out of here. The Seattle Seahawks have had a dominant team about 10, 15 years ago with the Legion of Boom, with Richard Sherman and all those characters. And they won a Super Bowl with Mr. Russell Wilson. And ever since then, after everybody retired, the team just kind of went in disarray. Pete Carroll tried to salvage the team as much as possible. However, it just went to shit. But unlike the San Francisco 49ers, who went to multiple Super Bowls and NFC championships, we have not won shit. So Kyle Shanahan has had plenty of ample opportunity to be successful. I think he's approaching year number 10 as a head coach, and he has no Super Bowls to show for it. So the pressure's on him. And then now you have McVay on the verge of going to his second Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford, who I think is going to be the NFL MVP, if I'm not mistaken. He's approaching 40, older player, but he's still fucking killing it. Puka Nacua doing great. Defensive line doing great. Running backs, at all levels. McVay brought up a whole brand new scheme of offense that I think a lot of teams are still trying to adjust, which is basically a 3 tight end set instead of 2. So the point is that the guy's developing and he's growing and he's evolving, right? So he's adapting and really making teams kind of adjust. And unfortunately, the San Francisco 49ers, regardless of the amount of talent that they currently have on the roster, they have just not been able to finish it. I think the Kansas City Chiefs kicked our ass multiple times, even though we were actually ahead and could have won a couple Super Bowls, and it all just went to shit. And then we had an NFC championship where unfortunately the luck just didn't go on our side, and we dropped a blatant interception that would have sealed the game or would have given us an opportunity for us to bounce back and beat the Rams. That didn't happen. Then before that, when Emmanuel Sanders was missed on a long throw, 40, 50 yards from Mr. Jimmy Garoppolo, porn star Jimmy, he didn't reach him. That would have been a touchdown that would have put us ahead, and more than likely we would have closed out the game. Then you have the San Francisco 49ers as recently playing the Kansas City Chiefs, where Jake Moody misses multiple, single point conversions, touchdown conversions to nothing. Then Mr. Kyle Shanahan, instead of trying to score a damn touchdown, settles for a field goal. So at this point, I just don't know if it's the coach, if it's the general manager, if it's just luck, if it's a PG&E substation with all the exorbitant amount of fucking injuries on this team is just absolutely diabolical. You have Nick Bosa out for a year. You had Fred Warner out for a year. You had Ricky Pearsall, who cannot stay on the fucking field. You have him coming in and out. And then you have other multiple injuries, including George Kittle, which one of your key pivotal pieces in your offense goes down. Then you don't have nothing. Then also, not only that, you had Brock Purdy out for 6 games because of a bad toe. And then you had Mac Jones come in his absence and dominate and play good, but at the same time, your team is what it is, right? Just basically at this point, just holding on for dear life, right? So clearly the San Francisco 49ers, this is not the year. I just don't know what they're going to become. Then you have the offseason shenanigans that are on the verge of happening. You have Mike McDaniels getting released from Miami, now looking for a home. Robert Saleh signs as a head coach with the Tennessee Titans. You have the Buffalo Bills letting go of their coach, even having Josh Allen and not getting to the Super Bowl. And then the Raiders just being the Raiders, and Jerry Jones just being Jerry Jones and being so optimistic about where the team is and what he's planning on doing. So now the head coach carousel begins, right? But then here we are sitting with Mr. Kyle Shanahan with multiple NFC championships, multiple division titles, and then yet we still don't have a fucking Super Bowl. As a fan, honestly, I'm a little frustrated and disheartened that I don't even think that the Niners are going to win a Super Bowl in my tenure, in my life. I think by the time I actually enjoy a damn Super Bowl with the San Francisco 49ers, my kids are probably going to be in high school or way past that. So I don't know. At this point, Kyle Shanahan is going on 10 years of being with the San Francisco 49ers, and what does he have on his resume, right? You have multiple misses on the first-round picks because the draft picks for the San Francisco 49ers have been a little bit questionable. And on the back end, you really don't know what the fuck they're drafting. They really have not hit on a lot of their drafts. So whatever it is that they're doing, the players that they are getting on the first round, second round, they need to reevaluate and reassess how they're going to be approaching this moving forward, because obviously it's getting you there, but it's not getting you over the hump. You continue to stop and you fail where it is most pivotal. And now, Jesus Christ, where it's more pivotal, right? So then, as soon as you're on the verge of embarking on a possible Super Bowl run, you lose. And then you have the injury bug, which the San Francisco 49ers, man, I swear, if you look up the statistics, I think they are the most injury-prone team in the last 5 years in the NFL. The Niners have had the most. What does that relate to? Why does that happen? I do not know. Maybe you guys can answer that. But that's my rant. Now, this freaking weekend, I'm going to be forced to see the Rams and the Seahawks, and who the fuck do I root for? Honestly, I could tell you this right now. I don't want to root for the Seahawks. Flat out. I can't. And if you're a Seahawks fan, this is why. I just can't stand your fan base. I can't. You're annoying as shit. All right? You guys act high and mighty like you guys already won the damn Super Bowl just because you beat the Niners. And I get it. The rivalry is serious, but shit, dude. There's being cocky and there's being obnoxious. And the Seahawks, in my opinion, are obnoxious. They're just obnoxious ass fans. My compadre, my compa, basically the godfather to my kids, he lives in Washington, and he's a Seattle Seahawks fan. And holy shit, man, do I tell you the amount of shit that man talks. And my comadre is a Niner fan, so you know how that goes. I mean, I got to hear it from my family. I got to hear it from my friends. There's people on group chats. I mean, shit, man, it's just annoying as hell. So I'm rooting for the Rams because the Rams don't have a fan base. They don't. Really don't. You go down to L.A., and there's a lot more Niner fans than there are Rams fans. And the Rams fans are basically, they're fans right now. They're more like bandwagon fans, in my opinion, because the second that team starts underperforming or not doing what they're supposed to do, I guarantee that they won't be as loyal to the team. Maybe the old school guys, right? But the new folks, the new teenagers, nah, highly doubt it. So that's where we're at. And then we have the most boring ass AFC championship. You have backups because Bo Nix took himself out in the game. So Bo Nix with the Denver Broncos, whose defense is a damn old 49er team. Explain that one to me. If you guys Google the Denver Broncos and look up the depth chart for their defense, you'll see a lot of old San Francisco 49er guys on that defensive line. And not a defensive line, but a defensive back. So you have Talanoa Hufanga, you have Dre Greenlaw, who are badasses in their own right, and they're on the defense. And guess what? The Broncos were rated number 1 defense in the entire NFL, I think, followed by the Texans, who didn't do shit because of C.J. Stroud. And then they're playing America's or the NFL sweethearts right now, which are the New England Patriots with Mr. Drake May, which I don't know where the fuck he came from, but they're doing great. It's the AFC. You take out Mahomes, it's free reign, dude. And then on the NFC, it's just the NFC West. That's it. I mean, the fact that you have the San Francisco 49ers, the Rams, and the Seahawks in the playoffs from one division, that should tell you enough how badass the division is. The Cardinals right now are in rebuild mode, and the San Francisco 49ers, I don't know where the fuck they're going to be next season, honestly. I think I would look at it and be like, if they don't pick up good pieces, good solid foundation players that's going to allow them to really maximize their potential and their window, and Kyle Shanahan needs to think outside his box, I don't see us winning next year in the division. I just don't. I see the Niners actually probably walking away from Kyle next season and not renewing his contract. Or John Lynch. I mean, they've given him 10 years and no Super Bowls. I think at some point you kind of have to make a decision and be like, you know what, this is not working out, and maybe go elsewhere. He's a great coach, don't get me wrong, but maybe he's also just needs a fresh start. You know what's so fucked up though? The thing that would kind of mess everything up is what if he goes to a different team and he wins a damn Super Bowl? I mean, that would be a punch in the gut for me. I'd be like, what the fuck, dude? Come back. No. It would just be horrible. But I digress. So what are we going to be talking about today? So there's a couple topics I really wanted to touch in, and I do want to do story time for you guys and a little bit of a background on some things. So as some of you know, I am from Nicaragua. So I wanted to provide a little bit of a background story of my country that I was born in. And because honestly, a lot of people do not know where the hell Nicaragua is on a map. And I wanted to really tell a story with that, and then possibly maybe even tell a story about parenting and old school parenting and how this translates to some parents now and why they are how they are, and how that all of that impacts our own behaviors. Okay. So let's start. If you look at Nicaragua on a map, one thing that jumps out immediately, it's a country that is shaped by the water, right? To the west, you have the Pacific Ocean, And to the east, you have the Caribbean Sea. And in between, you have two enormous inland lakes, Lake Managua and Lake Nicaragua, I think. And that geography is more than just pretty. It's just gorgeous. Because for centuries, outsiders looked at Nicaragua and saw a shortcut, a potential passage, right, across the Atlantic, across the Americas, and a place to control trade, power, and the future. But this story doesn't begin with outsiders. It begins with the people who already lived between the two waters. So before Nicaragua was Nicaragua, long before the Spanish arrived, what we now call Nicaragua was a crossroad of cultures, right? In the West, which was on the Pacific side, many communities were connected to the larger Mesoamerican world. People who farmed maize and built villages with systems of trade and ceremony. Groups often discussed in this region include the Nicaragua, or Nahua speaking, and Chorotea, among others. In the east side, on the Caribbean side, life moved to a different rhythm. More river routes, coastal travel, smaller communities, and they spread through the forests and wetlands, right? This region was influenced by the Caribbean networks and included indigenous people tied to languages and cultures different from the West. So you had Caribbean influence on one end and you had Western influence on the other. And even then, you can see the pattern that repeats across Nicaraguan history, right? Two coasts, two worlds, one country. So then the Europeans arrived. So Europeans first arrived in the Caribbean side of the region back in the early 1500s, right? And within decades, Spanish power moved into the Pacific lowlands, pushing conquest, forcing labor, and colonial rule. Spanish colonial Nicaragua formed around the Pacific side, where the land was more accessible for colonial settlement. And two cities would become central, León and Granada. They were the original cities, and then their rivalry would shape politics for generations. But here's what made Nicaragua special, unique in the region. It wasn't just colonized by Spain. Along the Caribbean coast, Britain built influence through trade, alliances, and later political control. That meant Nicaragua was pulled between two empires and two visions of the world, which a lot of people do not know. So right away, Nicaragua's origin story is a little bit complicated, right? Spanish foundations in the West and British influence reach the East, and indigenous nations trying to survive and adapt in the middle. That's trippy. Then we talk about independence, and the country splits into two factions, right? So in 1821, Central American provinces declared independence from Spain. Nicaragua didn't just instantly become stable or united. It became a battleground of ideas and elites. Nicaragua briefly joined the Mexican Empire, then became part of the United Provinces of Central America, and finally became fully independent as its own republic in 1838. The biggest internal struggle? A tug-of-war between rival power bases, often described as liberals in León and the conservatives in Granada. Basically, Republicans and Democrats. See, same bullshit, right? Just back in the day. Even then, you had your divide. At the same time, the Caribbean coast remained politically unusual. Britain held influence there for much of the 19th century before that control gradually faded and the region was integrated more directly into Nicaragua. So even looking now, so if you go to Nicaragua as we speak, and a lot of people don't know this, right? If you go to the Caribbean side of the country, you're going to see a lot of much darker skinned gentlemen that look African American. They're by the coast. And on the other side, on the Spanish side, you're going to see more light skinned people, different colored eyes because of the Spanish influence. And on the Caribbean side, you also see a lot of mixed between British and African American slaves and etc. So there's this vast combination of cultures, right? You have the Caribbean influence on one side, you have the colonial empire on the other, and even to this day, you still see a little bit of the bad blood, right? So people from the East talk shit about people from the West. It just happens. But that's just how it was. But this particular thing made it even worse, and it's called the William Walker issue. And I'll explain who William Walker is. And this is going to sound fucking weird and crazy for you guys. So in the mid-1800s, Nicaragua becomes a stage for one of the wildest episodes in Central American history. So Mr. William Walker was a United States adventurer and what people called filibuster, who was invited into Nicaragua during a civil conflict. Again, he came over here to help, okay? He came over to Nicaragua just to simply help and assist, not to do shit. But, however, within a short time, he seized power and declared himself president of Nicaragua in 1856. So it's hard to overstate how destabilizing this was, right? And it drew neighboring countries into war and made Nicaragua's sovereignty feel like something outsiders could grab if the moment was right. So because there was no unity, because there was no unification of both cultures, because the East and the West were so busy fighting each other, you can just go to Nicaragua back in the 1850s and try to, if you had enough of a measuring stick, you could generally speaking become president and take over the country, and you didn't even have to be from there, which is fucking diabolical that would even happen. But that's what happened. But Mr. William Walker's regime didn't last. But the trauma did. It embedded fear into the national memory. Foreign helpers can become foreign rulers. And to this day, my beautiful country of Nicaragua is one stubborn ass mofo. They refuse to accept help from foreign, especially from the States, and even started back in 1856 because of this fucking cocky idiot. So, but that wouldn't be it. So I want to give a little bit of the background. When you guys hear a lot of the stuff about Nicaragua and Central America, Nicaraguan government, communism, etc., I'm trying to not justify the origins of the country and why it is what it is, but I definitely want to provide a little bit of a background on the country and why it feels a certain way about Western influence, right? So you have to think about the East, you had British influence. The West, you had the Spanish, and even that wasn't vibing. Then you had this dumbass, Mr. William Walker, coming in saying, I'm going to help you. And everybody's like, oh, great, he's going to help us. And then all of a sudden he's like, you know what? I like it here so much, I'm going to make myself fucking president. And the fucker wasn't even from there. And I'm sorry I'm saying this shit, but it's true. And then you wonder why people are a little bit batshit crazy back in the day. So all this trauma resonates, right? So the people that lived through this, they pass down this message through their kids. So now that hatred towards the West, it's now generational. And let's see if it changes, y'all. Okay, we're early 1900s. Let's see if it changes. So a canal dream and a geopolitical magnet, right? So for decades, powerful nations looked at Nicaragua and saw potential, right? A route across the continent using San Juan River and Lake Nicaragua. And it was a possible alternative to Panama. You didn't have to go through Panama if you found a way to go to Nicaragua. So a lot of people used it as, hey, logistically, it just makes more sense. The country is not unified. It's up in arms. It's fucking completely unstable. If you go in there and unify it, you can basically control that area. So you had a bunch of countries that came into Nicaragua for the wrong fucking reasons. And again, people realize this. The trauma is there. People from Nicaragua have a total massive amount of PTSD. So Good old U.S. involvement in the era of occupation. In the early 1900s, everybody, Nicaragua's politics were unstable, which to this day, we all know this, and foreign interests were deeply involved, especially the United States. So a key moment came in 1909 when the U.S. backed forces opposing President Jose Santos Zelaya, and soon the era of the U.S. intervention escalated. So, the United States back in 1909 basically backed up a revolution to remove the existing president, Jose Santos Zelaya, for their own interest. Okay, so again, Western influence, bad, and everybody at that moment in time despised the U.S. Now you're starting to see why. So from 1912 to 1933, the United States Marines were a major presence in Nicaragua, believe it or not, and part of a broader U.S. pattern in the Caribbean and Central American during that era. Now, for the ones who benefited from the U.S. being there, it was stability. But for others, it was occupation like it's been before. A lot of people realize that, hey, they're here for different fucking reasons. They're not really here to help us. They're here to exploit us and turn us into Puerto Rico 2.0, which Cuba fought against. So again, I want to give you a little bit of that lesson, right? So then, after all this shit is happening, then the myth is born. The legend, the myth, and the man who started some shit. So, and this is a very controversial figure for some of you that don't know. So, Augusto Cesar Sandino is a very important name in Nicaraguan history. Whether you like him or hate him, he just existed and sparked a fire that to this day continues. So, Mr. Augusto Cesar Sandino, he emerges in the late 1920s as a guerrilla leader who refused to accept political deals that left U.S. military power in place. He refused it. He didn't like it. He wasn't there for political gain. He was there because he wanted to see. He existed because he refused to allow further Western involvement into his country because it impacted him so much. And it impacted the people that he grew up with. It impacted his lands. It impacted his territory. It impacted him directly, the poor. He fought in the Northern Highlands and became a symbol of anti-occupation and resistance across Latin America. That's what he sparked. Because you had one farmer fight back against occupation, was not easily corrupted, and refused to bend the knee. So he rallied the small villages and the underprivileged and the people that didn't thrive and benefit from political influence and basically catering to the U.S.'s occupation and involvement. And he unified the country in that way, causing a further divide between the rich and the have-nots versus the haves-a-lots. So with all this drama, in 1933, the United States saw that shit was getting real and the U.S. forces withdrew. It was getting way too hot. And partially because the political calculus changed, partly because the occupation had become costly, unpopular. Back in 1933, the propaganda was kind of coming to the United States like, why are we here? Why are we here? We're taking advantage of these people. And then that became bad PR basically for the U.S. And they said, yeah, man, I think we better leave. But leaving didn't mean Nicaragua was suddenly free from coercive power, because the U.S. had helped build a new internal force, the National Guard. And that force would soon become the backbone of a dictatorship. So What that means is, so with the influence from the early 1920s, the U.S. backed political people in office at that moment in time felt that they needed training and backup because Mr. Sandino came out of nowhere rallying guerrilla warriors. So the U.S. was like, hey, look, we're going to train your folks, people that follow you, to defend yourself. And they created a National Guard for Nicaragua and that government in power. Not knowing that that would become a tool that that particular person in power would utilize to establish his dictatorship. So this sparked the Somoza dynasty. Remember that stinking name. And I will explain why this was a dictatorship. In the late 1930s, the power consolidated around Anastasio Somoza Garcia, who used the National Guard that was trained by the states, by the U.S. He used the National Guard and political alliances to take complete control, launching a family dynasty that would dominate Nicaragua for decades. And this is the crazy shit for you guys that don't know. From 1936 to 1979, how many years is that? 43? For 43 years, the Somoza family's rule, backed at different times by foreign support and internal patronage, defined modern Nicaragua for many citizens as a mix of modernization, corruption, inequality, and repression. So, while they were getting rich and pitching that they were trying to modernize Nicaragua, on the back end, they were getting deals from other countries, therefore becoming corrupt. There was a lot of nepotism, inequality, lands being taken, and a lot of repression. So that basically that separation between the people who had money and the people who didn't become even greater and greater and greater. That divide was absolutely insane, where people were basically saying, you know what, dude, I am sick and tired of this shit. So then the revolution started, and there was little pockets within the country that was divided once more. So again, we're now in 1979. So let's go back. Let's go a brief little history lesson, right? If you're staying on to this. So I want to give you guys an understanding of where my country is and why it's batshit crazy. So in 1821, we're going back to the 1800s. 1821, divided republics, East and West. Two different influences from Spain and Britain. They never jived. Then, when there is some sort of stability, then comes another dumbass, Mr. William Walker, who pisses on everything and makes shit even worse, therefore causing an even greater divide. So people are still pissed. They're still divided, still edgy, and paranoid. Then the 1900s come around, and here comes the U.S. Hey, I'm going to help you. And they help completely debunk an existing president that was elected by the people, Mr. President, Mr. Jose Santos Zelaya. They remove his ass from office. So again, instability, internal repression, internal fighting, a revolution. Then they hand over the keys to a dictatorship who makes shit even worse. And now we're in the 1960s, 1936. Now, then we have 43 years of a dictatorship where this person is literally separating and drawing a line between the people who have money and the people that don't. There hasn't been stability ever, dude. There has never been fucking stability in this country. So then, here comes Mr. Sandino, who sparked the revolution. Meanwhile, Sandino's name didn't disappear after he was murdered because he was assassinated. But I will go into his story maybe on a different episode. But long story short, Mr. Sandino was betrayed by, some people say, the Somoza family. So basically, in summary, the Sandino supporters and the influence that he had, and basically getting everybody together and fighting against the oppression, it was getting out of control. It was getting out of hand. So the Somoza party basically extended an invitation to Mr. Sandino to come to the Capitol office and discuss and have lunch and dinner, etc., and talk over a possible treaty and how they were going to basically just squash the drama and make it all go away. As soon as Mr. Augusto Sandino leaves that office, he gets assassinated by the National Guard who protected Augusto Somoza. So he was betrayed with the promise of peace. So then you have his supporters now losing their shit. So in the 1960s, again, the Somoza family rule was there in 79, but in the 1960s, after everything what happened with Sandino, a revolutionary movement took the name of the Sandinista National Liberation Front. It was founded in 1961. Now, this is a particular group that is not very, let's say the U.S. does not like them at all. But this is where it was born from. It was born out of false promises, repression, abuse, betrayal, and absolute hatred. Where else would it come from? So, this small little party, small at that time, grew and grew and grew and grew. And then the revolution and the Cold War storm began. So in 1979, after 10 to 11 years, the Sandinista revolution overthrew the Somoza dictatorship. But revolution wasn't the ending. It was the start of another era of conflict, unfortunately. Again, more fucking conflict, because Nicaragua became one of the hottest flashpoints of the Cold War in the Americas, with a Contra war that dominated the 80s and left deep scars across the country. I mean, the country has had so many different influences, so many different countries, and basically making promises of support. And unfortunately, because of the scars that Nicaragua has had against the U.S., when the U.S. tried to help in anything, it remembered. So, of course, they're going to go ahead and rely on other countries that are anti-U.S. and get that support. So, of course, the U.S. is like, well, if you're not with us, you're against us, and you're tied to that political party, and it just all goes to shit. And with the Contras, the Contra War, which a lot of people can Google this, the Contra War was very, very corrupt. It was basically the U.S. using the Contra, and the Contra using the U.S. for political influence and power. Then the Colombian cartels and all those shenanigans, El Cartel de Cali. It was basically drugs, cartels, corruption, political influence, you name it, and it was all taking place in the land called Nicaragua. And it's never stopped. I was born there. I saw this myself. Then in the 1990s, Nicaragua held elections that ended finally the Sandinista government of that era and began a long, complicated transition marked by political shifts and continuing debates over democracy, sovereignty, and the meaning of revolution. So shit got so bad in the 1990s, Nicaragua finally decided to take a deep breath and say, you know what, we're done with conflict. Let's just vote somebody else in power. But to this day, it's still unstable. So what's the origin story of Nicaragua? It's the story of a country born at a crossroads between oceans, between empires, between regions, between ideologies, right? And always fighting the same fundamental question. Who does get to decide Nicaragua's future? Is it the people or the powers that see it as a prize. That is the problem that I have. And unfortunately, my beautiful, gorgeous country, to this day in 2026, still cannot figure it out. And it's gotten so bad to the point that when you go to Nicaragua, because now we have a different dictatorship that took over that government with promises of independence, modernization, and it's the same thing every single time. And it's unfortunate that the country has never seen peace. It's only seen war. It's only seen aggression. It's never changed. So I wanted to provide you guys a little bit of a history lesson with this particular podcast, because I see a lot of things on social media, a lot of history folks that don't necessarily know history of some countries. And it's always good to understand where people come from, why they are, how they are. And it's not all what you think it is. It's not. People are painted a certain way. People are described a certain way, but it's always good to understand or try to understand with the other perspective. Because you just never know. You could have more in common with the person that's being oppressed, the person that is being taken advantage of, more than the one that is doing the taking advantage of somebody else. But this is a great example of what can happen to a country when it's so divided that people that don't have any decide to revolt, and they say they've had enough. And the U.S., for what it is, it's tried to manage and keep that balance between one and the other for so long that at some point, though, like, it's starting to boil over. And now with immigration reform, with everything that we see on TV, the current administration and the shenanigans and the people who it upsets, it is such a fragile state that we are in at this moment that I hope and pray every single night that it doesn't go awry. Because I never want to see young generations grow up where everything is segmented and segregated and completely just to shit. So I always engage and I challenge everybody who's always listening to these podcasts to always listen to a different perspective for every single situation that you hear on TV. There's always two different sides to every case, and this goes the other way. So always pause, listen, observe, and just try to engage and have a conversation with folks. Talk to them, get their perspective. Don't just complain them. Don't just completely tune them out because they speak differently than you do. They're not less educated because they have a broken language. They're just as smart as you. So that was the history lesson for today. I think today's episode is going to approach about 50 minutes. I'm going to try to keep this one short. But for next week, we're going to go back to our normal stuff and talk about parenting stuff and parenting trends. But I definitely wanted to tell you this story and kind of give a little bit of the background of the country and what it is. So right now with social media and everything else, I just always have to be mindful of what's being told to folks out there. And I know today's episode is not a funny one. It's more of a serious one, but I definitely wanted to give you guys a little bit of a history topic for you to listen to and understand the country, understand me, understand my folks, my peoples, and where we come from. And I definitely want to touch on that. And there's a billion other little topics that I want to touch on, but I want to keep things brief and not so controversial. Oh, and by the way, so I think I spoke about this on the last one. So I don't know if some of you guys know or don't know, but there's been certain episodes that I've made that unfortunately are demonetized because of the content that I spoke about. And I will go into details as to what that content was. But all I can tell you that it's interesting. the things that you're allowed to speak on and the things that you are not. And just always remember, somebody's listening, somebody's watching. So be careful, be mindful, and just try to do your best to always consistently speak your mind the right way, intelligently, where nobody can shut you down. So with that being said, thank you very much for tuning in so far. God bless, stay safe, like, share, subscribe, and good night.